Hey everybody, welcome to today's presentation, Road Testing the Top 10 Sales Predictions of 2020. I'm Jamie, I work at Ambition. I'll be your moderator today. Brief housekeeping notes before we get started. We're going to be together for the next 30 or so minutes. I will send a recording though, so if you need to hop off or if you're just loving this and you want to share it with people, we will email that to you after today's presentation, so don't worry. We got you covered there. Also, if you have questions today, we will have a Q&A at the end. So type those in the Q&A box, and I will get to those at the end of our conversation here. So we got you covered. So who are we? I'm Jamie. As I said, I work at Ambition. I'll tell you more about that in a second. Really excited, though, to partner with Challenger today. And specifically, I've got Kevin Hart. He's the VP of Sales and Marketing at Challenger. Hey, Kevin.
Hey guys.
And if you're unfamiliar with Challenger, I don't know where you've been, but Challenger is dedicated to driving exceptional growth by changing behaviors in sales, marketing, and service teams. Their commercial transformation programs include message creation, skill development, and implementation support. Each program is supported by ongoing research and backed by their best-selling books, The Challenger Sale, which we've all read and love here, The Challenger Customer, and The Effortless Experience. So super honored to have you here. And then representing the Ambition side is Brian Trauschold, who is a co-founder here at Ambition. And we are a gamification and coaching software program platform for modern high-performing sales organizations. We help you improve employee performance, manager effectiveness, and team culture. We're trusted by brands like Verizon, DocuSign, HPE, ADP. Hey guys, you're on the line. Exactly, and the Atlanta Braves. So really excited there.
Hey everyone.
Paula says, hello, Brian. So Paula's here checking in.
Paula, how are you?
Hours.
Thanks
Paula,
for
you'll get your time. So we're going to jump right in. We got a lot of really good ones. So what are we talking about today? When I say road testing the top 10 sales predictions of 2020, as I stated, I'm on our marketing team, and every marketer, there's a few common blog posts, if you will, or pieces that you put out a year. In December, you do a recap of all the best things that you put out. You might say, like, let's prep for 2020. January rolls around, you got to keep those clicks up. And so you predict, you get your crystal ball out, and you put 10 things together. Usually they make your company sound great. And you say really bold stuff that sometimes is backed by data and sometimes is just purely made up. And everyone does this. We did it, and I'm joking about it being made up, but there are a lot of common themes. So I tried to pull the top 10 ones that I saw specifically in the sales conversation, and wanted you guys to tell me whether or not you think they're good, bad, ugly. Are we actually headed in these directions? Are robots replacing all of us? So we are going to just jump right in. So our first one, this is one that I feel like every year you see just the channels change. So thing that we've always done for all time is going to die, and new thing that we may be doing or not doing is like the only thing that you do. So in this case, the prediction is that video and text in the sales conversation will replace email and phone calls. No one's going to use their phone to actually talk to people. And I used to work in email marketing. It's literally been dying since 2008. So will this be the year? Gong, our friends at Gong, though, when we say video, what we mean in the context of this conversation is that video marketing, video in the sales conversation is really using a webcam like we're doing right now. So they say that successful deals have higher win rates when a webcam is used. So that is kind of where they're coming from there, 40% more won deals. And then Thomas Parbs, who's a text thought leader, is saying that, when we say text in the sales conversation, it's, all about how you use it. It's not saying that text is going to be used as the only way that you communicate with people. But it's saying, hey, it has a pretty high likelihood that you're going to get a response. 90% of text messages are actually looked at. For me, it's 100%. And when you're texting inbound leads, a really effective use of that is to do things like remind them about meetings or ask them how a meeting went that they missed, or things like that. So The reason I bring up text as well is that we had our sales kickoff last week for 2020, and our chief revenue officer essentially said, how do you identify your champion in the buying process? Well, you have their cell phone number. If you're not texting with your buyer, are they really your champion? Are they really the person that is going to help you push that deal forward? So my question for both of you is, do you agree with that? Brian, this might be a trick question, a scary question for you. But in these long, complex sales cycles that a lot of our buyers are having, yeah, where do video and text play in? And do we really think that email and phone calls are going away?
Who's that, Brian or me?
Both, either, whoever, jump in.
So, I mean, I would tell you, we definitely see more of it. I think definitely as you move sub-billion-dollar company where maybe you've got a slightly younger CRO profile or head of sales profile, certainly more often. Mm-hmm. Not quite as much in large enterprise. Video for sure. I think I might be the last one when I work from home using a phone, an actual phone. It's not hardwired, but it's an actual phone. It's close to bad. The one thing I would tell you though, like, and this is very recent exposure in Q4, I will say there's the risk with texting and mobile phones for a little bit of what we would call the talker profile. When you've got a prospect that is pushing their mobile phone on you, that is constantly reacting on their mobile phone, it's not often a good sign that you found a mobilizer. You found somebody who really likes to engage with people selling them stuff. And we saw examples of that where we were getting 30 texts a day back and forth with a mobilizer. They didn't buy anything, right? They couldn't get it pushed through internally. So the scarcity of use, I think, is important when you're looking at it and measuring it versus the ubiquitous, we use it all the time. Like, I'm reaching out to you at 6 a.m., 7 a.m. Not always the best sign, but we definitely see more of it.
Yeah, I would agree. I think this is a perfect example. Like, you know, we've gone from this world where when I came into inside sales, it was purely phone. It was on the desk. It was other than email, my only mode of medium of communication. And so, you know, now every call, whether someone else on the other side has their webcam on or not, or they're dialed in, I'm showing my face. I want them to see I'm a human. I'm trying to connect with them. I'm looking at the screen. And, you know, personally, I want to, if it's getting into text, we had a deal end of year and the buyer and myself are texting back and forth on Christmas Eve. Do I think that's how every deal should go? Definitely not. But when you're in that kind of last hour, 11th hour situation, I think it was important. And I think that, Martin McWaters, our VP of sales, is right. If you don't have a champion or if you don't have a key influencer in the org who's at a text level with you, especially, Kevin, like you said, in a more modern organization, you may not be actually in the driver's seat, you think. So, you know, for me, it's about connecting. It's about having this eye to eye, or at least you can see my eyes situation that we're trying to replicate maybe the older way where we'd be actually in the office, which is drastically less common now.
Yeah. So verdict would be enhancement, not a murderer of email and phone calls. Okay. So Kevin, you can keep your landline there going strong. You got it. I'm with you. I'm with you.
So one of these, you know, like cord.
Oh my God. Is that a cord? What is, I've never seen such a thing. So that
the cord just stays with us now for me. It's like, it's with me all the time. Can't get away from it.
So that brings us to my next prediction, which is all hail. This is the dawn of the age of the millennial buyer. And this one is my favorite. I have some great slides on this that I'm really proud of. So in 2019, 45% of tech buyers are millennials. So, and again, I want to point out 23 to 48, that's a pretty big bucket. Some of these people have been buying technology for a decade. So just, or buying anything and working real business jobs. So millennial buyer rising, I don't know. But some interesting stats about what it means when we talk about what that persona is. Vendors who were very influential with millennials during the buying process were 2 times as likely to be open about product limitations and connect buyers with current customers. So, it isn't that the millennial buyer is new as much as the conversation could be shifting. This, I think, is super compelling. 60 to 90% of millennials have already decided on their purchase before they even engage with their company's sales team. I saw different flavors of this stat, but I liked the way this one was framed the best. And then millennials are super suspicious when the brands just want their attention. So they're savvy, they're tech savvy, they have been online doing research, and you as a human being trying to sell them something are irrelevant now in 2020. So my question to you guys is, everyone has this hot take on millennials. So how does a seller actually insert control over a sales conversation that's already been 60 to 90% won or lost by the time they're getting on the phone? And Kevin, I kind of point that at you because I feel like this has got to be something that Challenger talks about a lot.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's interesting how data all comes together. The stat you had earlier that 60 to 90% buyers have already made a decision. We looked at it in a different lens, which is if you take a group of buyers trying to make a purchase, which you'd argue in most B2B spaces, it's going to be a group anywhere from 8 to 15 people trying to come together on a decision, not one. On average, they are 57% of their way through the purchase process before they reach out to vendors. So you take this whole group of millennials as a proxy and say, what are they really good at? They're really good at going and figuring out what they believe their needs are. Then they're good at figuring out, because everybody's website's gotten better, at who can fill that need.
Mm-hmm.
Then they're pretty good at looking at customer reviews to figure out who's the most expensive and who do people like. And then they're good at meeting with vendors and saying, I like your stuff. Can you do it at their price? And I think for sellers, it's hard to say it's up to the seller to fix that problem. It's up to the company to fix that problem, right? The company has got to do a better job of really thinking through what is the content they're placing out that millennials are going to go find, or really any buyer, and does it uniquely lead back to them, right? Is it disruptive of their purchase process? Because if you can't find your way back in that, what we would call the big blue arrow, or the 57%, you are going to be stuck either losing business or offering it at low margin, right? You're going to do it at your competitor's price, even if you've got the best product. That's a lose-lose, and sellers can't win that fight on their own, right? You need a sales and marketing engine that is tuned to go out and disrupt with the right kind of content, that when you do get in with buyers, you've actually planted seeds, you've sparked interest around an idea that you're uniquely equipped to solve. So yes, I think we see more and more folks getting equipped with information. There is a way to combat it. I wish it was as easy as just telling sellers to do it, but you can certainly get after it. It just requires a concerted effort.
Good answer. Okay, I got work to do. So prediction 3, tech stacks will continue to grow, and within that comes more competition for B2B sellers. So what do I mean by that? Inside Sales Now Zant has a stat saying that the average annual spend on sales technology was $4,500 per rep per year, and can span 5 different categories of sales tools. So as sales tech grows, as the industry grows, people are buying technology. I know we have tons of tools, both on the sales and marketing side, that we use to try and make sure that we're tailoring that conversation as best as we can. And so, while we're spending more on these tools, or spending a lot on these tools, on the flip side of that, for us, and this is going to be directed at Brian, how does that proliferation of tech, both in the purchasing process, so I'm buying more technology, but as a result, there is more technology to buy. There are more companies popping up every day that do, a flavor of what we all do. So how in all industries can we create more, create and sort of cut through the noise of that competition in the sales cycle? And who are we really competing with, especially when we're buying or selling B2B tech?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a real, it's not a trend, it is the new reality that the amount of vendors out there, if you want to call us that, selling technology and selling these software as a service products to any business in any industry is only increasing. And I don't think that we're going to go away from companies using, technology to fuel or improve whatever selling motion they have. So I think we have to be challenge ourselves as sellers to say, how do I really empathize with my customer, understand the business problem that we in our solution specifically solve, and how do we touch all of the other tools in their stack? Because it's not a static sales process where they only have one tool and they're only buying something for sales coaching like Ambition. We're working with 5 or 6 or 7 other products in their environment, And so, to come in and think that it's always just you versus your competitor, I think is actually no longer the case. It's you versus the budget versus someone else who has a higher priority problem they want solved, versus are you going to overlap with another set of technologies or tools? And that's across the board. So I think it's about, early in the sales process, salespeople going in and asking and discovering what tools are in place, what problems do they solve, what are the biggest initiatives and challenges that the buyer is trying to navigate, and then figuring out how you can be a value-added product or vendor or solution in their environment, because it's not just going to be, let me sell you this widget, my widget's better than the other person's widget. There's a whole ecosystem of things that are in there all touching each other.
Yeah. Love that answer. And specifically too, I find that we partner with a lot of other companies in our space more than I ever have seen at other places that I've been, because we're all in it together. We have to make friends with each other.
I think it's critical.
Yeah.
For sure. And all these departments that are using tools are all, they're all in their own competition for resources and time and priority within their own organization. So you want to make sure you're making the people buying your tool or software or product look good.
Yep. All right. So speaking of people, this is one of my favorite ones. Frontline sellers will be replaced with AI, chatbots, virtual assistants, etc. All of our SDRs on the line today. I'm sorry, but the robot invasion is here. Gartner has a stat: by 2020, 30% of all B2B companies will employ artificial intelligence to augment at least one of their primary sales processes. However, Joe's got your back. Joe at Chorus, VP of Sales. A robot can't build rapport. So on the flip side, while people are willing to invest in augmentation or enhancements or chatbots or these kind of things, Joe's saying, hey, I still gotta have people. So bring it back. We don't have to spend a ton of time on this one, but I feel like this has been a threat for many years. Everyone's like, eventually we're going to automate everything. Automation will take all these jobs away. And, and I do think it will change the conversation, but what do you guys think about this? Specifically the quote of like, a robot can't build rapport. How does that factor into, and this is really for both of you guys, how does that factor into whether or not you make a choice to expand or grow your frontline sales team, and how does it change the function of what they do? Because I feel like this sort of technology affects them the most.
Yeah, I mean, I would say stats like this remind me that I should be flying my car to work.
Right.
I live in Maryland, and it still takes a very long time to get to Virginia because of the wheels and everything. Look, I think you've seen a rise of artificial intelligence, and there is a use for it in sales. I don't believe it's customer facing, especially not in a complex B2B sale. I mean, yes, you could put a chatbot on your website. Yes, you could potentially access some interest that way. But I think where you see the rise of AI right now, and I think it speaks to the quote from Gartner, is actually behind the scenes, right? I think you're seeing much more AI and algorithms and logic put into what exists in your CRM, data mining for ICP or ideal customer profile, trying to understand what's happened to the business so that you can plan better for the future. 100% support it there. I just don't see a world in the very near future where you'll be able to get what you need unless everybody wants to operate at a very, very low margin and is willing to sell for least common price, because that's what buyers will force the issue on if all you're doing is interacting with a robot, because they'll tell you exactly what you want and they'll be ready to sell it to them.
Love that.
I agree with this. I think this is an opportunity for great people, whether it's in business development or inside sales or hybrid field sales down the road. Like, I can't help but think about an interaction I had this morning with Delta, and I call Delta's premium line. It's a bunch of me talking to a computer, and I'm getting through, and it's fine. It's solving like 60% of the problem, but eventually you get to that point of complexity where talking to a human who actually helps me navigate me changing my flight from X to Y and all of the options is no longer acceptable just with this tick list and kind of a series of steps. And so at that point, Delta's probably done a great job of eliminating a lot of busy work for their people, but then they move me into a qualified conversation with a person who can solve the problem. And in like 6 minutes, it's magically fixed. I know the answer. I feel great about it. And so I think that we're going to have lots more, whether it's like Kevin said, chatbots on the site trying to make sure you get into the right queue or the right conversation, or when you do talk to a human, you're having a great experience because they have a lot of information. But I really agree with Joe. Like in that 8 minutes with someone from Delta, I got a great feeling. I felt excellent about the brand, and I'm like, oh, this great woman solved my problem wherever in the world she was. It was awesome.
And I'll just dovetail one last point. I mean, we do have a part of our business that addresses just the service experience. Like this is extremely true on the service side, where you think about the goal is not customer delight, it is reducing effort. And if you ever want to test that, call FootJoy. They pick the phone up on 2 rings, real person, have your phone number, call you by name, and I will guarantee you it creates a ton of brand loyalty because it is so easy to do business with. So I would watch out for the retro of this trend, which is chatbots getting ripped off sites and people saying, listen, we need a way for people to call a phone number, talk to a human being, because that's a differentiator in the space. Kind of like everybody runs one way, sooner or later somebody goes, right? That's how the fanny pack got back in. Like that was definitely dead in the late 80s, and here it is again. So what's old is new.
I mean, hey, rotary phones, 2021. We're all
pendulum is an
there.
Opportunity.
Right?
Yeah. Okay, so the next prediction I think fits really well with this, where everyone becomes a thought leader and people by people. So to your point, what you just said beautifully, the pendulum sort of swings. So on one hand, we have people saying robots will replace us. On the other hand, we're saying everyone in your company needs to have a unique, thoughtful, smart persona that's out there, because people are no longer listening to brands. We saw that the millennials are distrustful of brands. In general, they want to really connect with the individuals on your team and on a sales team. I think the biggest question that I have, and I'll direct this at Kevin as well, like how do you actually get busy salespeople at your business to stop and build some sort of online persona? Like, is that even fair? If we're talking about building this sort of content strategy around thought leaders, and Chorus, who we mentioned, does that really well. They have multiple people on their team that sort of have these, a lot of reach, like Beck Holland, who leads their BDR team. But how fair is it to put out sort of things like this that say everyone needs to be doing this? Because I feel like it seems very difficult to implement and scale.
Look, I mean, I think it's great in principle, right? Like if you can get all of your sellers to have truly unique things to say that speak to something your business does better by framing a customer challenge, what we would call commercial insight, go for it. What we see way more of, and anybody on the call, if you go look at your competitors' 3 websites, you'll find thought leadership is 100% table stakes, right? Like the thought of let's be smart and we'll win business doesn't work that way, right? Being smart puts you in a category, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to win anything. As a matter of fact, we see when you trust sellers to deliver this message solely, very often they say very smart things that teach customers into the arms of competitors. Because what they've taught them is to prioritize some feature or functionality or price above all else that we're good at, but somebody's better at, right? So, if you push it out too far to sellers to, hey, you guys will figure it out, you need some type of control that says, what is the message we're putting out, right? Does it disrupt the customer's current status quo? And does that ultimately lead back to us? If it doesn't, do we really want to spend this type of time and money deploying that kind of content, right? And if it's highly variable, in some ways I'd say you want to rein this in a little bit. Like I don't believe social selling all social selling is the same, works that way, right? I think having a very unique perspective that sparks interest, introduces particular ideas and kind of confronts status quo, really helpful, but I would not urge most companies to just pound the thought leadership bubble. You're gonna lose.
Yep. So that brings us to the next one, which is that companies will invest more in content quality and quantity in 2020. So, this is great. It really touches on what you just said. But the question would be, who defines what quality content means? To your end, thought leadership is a table stake. Being smart about what you're selling or the industry that you're in, regardless of what you do, is the name of the game, that you have to be producing that kind of content. But I do often find too that sometimes what the seller needs to get it done and what a marketing team thinks you need are not always aligned, and it's hard to stay in lockstep on that. So who defines what that quality content is? And Kevin, I'll point that at you, but Brian would love to know your thoughts as well.
I mean, listen, ultimately, I think we would point directly at the organization has to define. I don't believe there's an esoteric quality, right? So if it looks good, if it's got the right number of words, if it's on the right site, if the font's great, like you could argue this is high quality, well-produced content.
Mm-hmm.
However, what does it say, right? Does it offer a unique perspective on a challenge customers do or don't understand? Does it sound just like everybody else? Like that's the element I think folks have to be way more conscious of.
Mm-hmm.
I would not chase the quantity, right? I mean, you can generate leads through quantity, but then you got to start asking yourself, are they the right kind of leads? Are they our ideal customer profile? When they come in, do they force us to a false trade-off of, let's go spend more money on sellers because we've got all these leads, even though the leads we just generated are actually our non-ideal customer profile because we put so much content out there to drive somebody to put their hand up, but it doesn't align back to something we do uniquely better than anyone else. So I would say I wouldn't define it as, is it good? I would say, does it accomplish the mission of disrupting status quo? If it doesn't, let's not put it out there. If you can figure out how to do that at a segment level, chase the quantity barrel, but don't chase quantity absent knowing what good is supposed to look like. And don't get fooled by quality as what looks good. It's actually what accomplishes something at the front of the funnel.
Perfect. And all this content we have, sitting around, we want to make sure that our salespeople are enabled with it and armed with it. And so the other prediction is, and we're seeing this, there are tons of sales enablement people on this webinar, the empowered sales enablement leader as a key decision maker, as a role that even just in the last 2 or 3 years has more sort of say-so in the buying process when you're purchasing software, and also just generally at any business of any type, whether you're B2B or B2C. So Brian, specifically, we obviously talk about coaching. Our platform helps people do that. So sales enablement has had a huge impact on the coaching conversation, which is sort of bolstered by our combined efforts. So Challenger, Ambition, we help people have better conversations across the board and implement those. How do you think people talking about our products and services has shifted as this sort of sales enablement persona has entered the mix? How has it changed from how we need to talk to, let's say, a sales revenue leader versus an enablement leader when it comes to coaching?
Well, I think what's amazing about this kind of rise of sales enablement, which we've been able to see over the last few years across all industries, across a variety of segments, from enterprise to mid-market to small upstarts like ourselves, you see people who have visibility as well as the actionable tools to change sales process and to change sales training, sales content, how you ramp people very quickly. And so I think it's fantastic that you have a much more empowered leader or leadership group within an organization saying, how's our sales process working? Are we doing the actions? Do we have the right objectives? Are we tracking the right type of conversation or type of opportunities that we're creating? And then continually adjusting on that feedback cycle, because they get to touch, here's the content collateral, here are the value propositions we're going to give to the customer. They're touching, here's the hiring profile, here's the type of people we want, here's the training course. So they have a full purview, and they actually get to make those adjustments. And the organizations that seem to be doing this right are empowering those people. They're very, I would say, highly responsible or accountable to sales leadership, as well as marketing, as well as to the CEO. And they get to have a huge impact on revenue. And I think it's ultimately the best case for sellers. It is, these people are looking out for the full life cycle of a seller. And in an ideal world, that's going to help the customer. It's going to have a better buying experience for them. And they're going to have a higher quality, you're going to end up with higher quality products because the sales cycle is better.
That's awesome. Well, so sales enablement's having a great time. 2020, this is your year. Apparently it's also it's also the year of the revenue ops leader. So this prediction I saw multiple times as well. And the whole sort of reason that this is coming up is that for too long, we try to, combine all of our go-to-market efforts, sales, marketing, CS, but really we're not doing a good job of that. And so you're seeing more revenue ops leadership, whether that's a CRO or just someone who's called a whole RevOps team that is really responsible for making sure that all three of these sort of functions of the customer lifecycle are in lockstep and aligned. And so this one I want to get into Q&A, but sort of with our combined client roster, are we actually seeing more of this? Are we seeing more RevOps as a role coming up in the conversation, coming up in the buying cycle? Are they the person that we need to be focusing on in that cycle? Or did a bunch of just RevOps people write these predictions because they want to be in charge of everyone? What's happening here?
I think you're definitely seeing more of it. I think there's good and bad with it. I think the risk you run when you break down RevOps, love the idea of aligning sales and marketing. The ops word can get a little bit concerning when what you look at is how do I optimize the efficiency of different operations across our sales and marketing engine, absent a purview at times one level up, which is what are we trying to do, right? Are we trying to win more customer conversations? How do we go about doing that? And then let me build a process that enables that. Let me identify talent that can deliver on that. Let me build training that helps us do that. Let me get content that arms sellers to have disruptive conversations. If you're not aligned around that, and we've seen it, there's a great book, old book now, but called The Goal, where you go and look at it and you say, you can get no better and make every one of your processes or every one of your operations much better because they're aligned to the wrong goal, right? They are not achieving an end state that you want. So I would just be cautious of this because I see it a lot where somebody comes in and says, I'm going to fix process. And the question I would always ask is to do what? They say, well, we need a better process. And I know to do what? What are you trying to do with that process? And the answer is often, I don't really know. I just know it should be better. We want more visibility. I would be very, very careful about, have you really defined better? Do you know what end state looks like? And then work backwards from there. If we get there, RevOps is great. I mean, aligning sales and marketing to act together, optimizing for efficiency is great. Just make sure it aligns to good.
Love it.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think one thing, Jamie, really quickly, I think that we are seeing more of these CRO roles or RevOps roles and teams. I think we're seeing a huge shift in the market, and I'm sure folks listening are seeing this at their customers or their companies as well. We're going from a waterfall approach where people think of marketing is in front of sales, is in front of renewals or account management or some type of service. And that's becoming a circle, and that cycle is continually feeding itself. And, I don't think there's any start, and I don't think there's any end if you don't have great service and great account management and people feel great about your product and experience. You're not going to have word of mouth. You're not going to get referrals. You're not going to get references to the next customer. Similarly, in your sales cycle, if you aren't having a great buying experience, if you aren't walking the customer through how they're going to get value out of your solution, that's going to feed into the market. And so I think we're turning into this kind of continual cyclical model versus a 3 or 4 or 5 silos, however many it may be.
Love it. Well, prediction 9. This one's from some company called Ambitions, SEO-rich prediction post. It looks phony. We'll see. No, but Ambition started in 2013 as essentially a replacement for a whiteboard where you walk over and you do a March Madness style bracket, and we try to get, all these salespeople pumped about the Friday afternoon. We got to spin up a competition and have some fun here. And it has grown and evolved over time to meet the needs of going beyond the one-on-one coaching conversations are great, but how do you actually move the needle every day incrementally? How do you score reps? How do you make their work visible? All that kind of stuff. So our product does that. But specifically in 2020, we are seeing people, we're seeing it on the marketing side, people are searching for gamification still. It's still important. It's still clearly playing a role in pushing people to adopt behaviors over time. which is great for us. But my question, and Kevin, we were chatting about this before we hopped on this call. I was curious, just genuinely, like, are you seeing that out there? Are you seeing people, logically coming and saying, we need to implement a new methodology, or we need to improve process, and we actually know our goal, or maybe we don't know our goal, and we also need to put some bells and whistles in there so that reps are pumped about doing it. So are people doing this now? Do you think that gamification is important, and to what end?
Yeah, I think gamification is, it is certainly a hot button out there that folks have heard it. Folks know that, well, that would be better than not. So absolutely. And if you can put it against the right thing you're trying to gamify, even better. The one caveat is when you see folks think gamification or anything, any feature or any benefit can be the savior, versus make sure you've defined what it is you're trying to optimize and then go gamify it. And if you can do that, you can see really, really strong success. I think, look, if you can do it and you can do it well, and you've picked the right process that you're gamifying, why wouldn't you do it, right? It gets sellers more engaged, it gets teams more engaged. Like, there's nothing but upside in it. The only misguide you see is when folks think, okay, I gamified it, why isn't it working? Well, what if it was wrong to begin with, right?
Right. You got to send more texts. We're just trying to get more texts out there, guys. More text meeting set. No, I think that's a great point. And do you have any other thoughts on that before we move into our final prediction? Because I know we're getting a little long on time.
That was great.
Awesome. All right. So my favorite prediction is prediction 10. 62% of all thought leaders are 100% making up all of the crap that they say. And you guys have the best questions. So I am going to stop sharing, and we're going to do Q&A. So if you have questions that are new that I didn't get to, lay it on me. I think it'll be super fun and great. And we're just going to jump right in. So Jenny wants to know, I'd love to hear about successes in cold calling cadences and what motivates a team to make multiple touch points. So I think this is the perfect question following up the gamification one. How do we get people to do it? And what is actually successful when it comes to just, it's not inbound. Who am I calling? What do I do?
Well, I think one thing that Kevin just alluded to is, what I believe people get motivated about is their alignment and how their effort is impacting the overall goals or their specific team objective. And so I think one area where people make mistakes with gamifying or engaging around the wrong thing is people come in, there's some leaderboard or contest or a prize for doing X, Y, Z, but inherently they know that's not moving the ball forward, or that's not going to impact, the frontline seller or the revenue. So I think it's really important for managers, team leads, a director of sales, whomever is doing this, to say, what do I really need to, what KPI, what metric, what number am I trying to affect? And then tell that story and make it extremely transparent that here's why we're doing this. This is the effect that we want it to have and we believe it will have. And here's how you go execute on it. So if it's making more calls or talking to more prospects or having more real conversations versus just dials, those are things that I think, a sales development person or an inside salesperson can very easily say, oh yeah, of course, like that's something that we should be doing, and that's going to help us, move the ball forward on revenue, especially when they're supported with the right assets and training behind it. Don't just throw them out on an island and expect them to go figure it out.
Next question, and I think this is, this comes up a lot in our conversations. People are like, okay, I know my goal. I know that what my KPIs are. What's the actual balance of time that needs to be spent? Because time spent coaching or going beyond the one-on-one, that takes a rep off the phone. That takes them out of their email, or theoretically it does. So Chris wants to know, what do you think about sales reps training every day for about 10 to 20 minutes around specific product content, market evaluation, methodology, et cetera? And Kevin, I'll throw this to you. Like, what does that sweet spot look like for a lot of clients?
Look, I think it's going to be largely determined by the culture in a company. I think one of the biggest mistakes, though, most organizations make is they look out and they think like, oh no, I can't do that because it'll eat up the seller's time and they won't do all of these wonderful things I expect them to do all the day. Like, I would encourage people, like, take a real hard look. Like, if you think your sellers are on the phone 7.5 hours a day so they don't have the 30 minutes, like, you're wrong, right? Like, they have the time. And I think there's this equation that sellers are 100% of the time at 100% of their capacity, and anything you do costs something else. It's just not the case, right? I mean, what and how do you prioritize that investment, right? Like, we know manager coaching, we know development of sellers, we know investment into sellers is one of the biggest returns you'll get on a performance level. Like, it is separated because it's not straight line. It's not, I did this call and I got this deal, but it is, you know, the difference of a high performing manager and a core performing manager, anywhere from 7 to 17% top line performance. Like, show me where else you're going to get that, right? Like, you're not. So if you don't invest there, I would argue there's nothing you could take off their plate that's not more important than, right? I mean, like what you're talking about, the idea of investing in the individual, investing in coaching. What I would last caveat, like, you can't make it performance management 30 minutes a day, right? It can't be like, here's all the stuff you're doing wrong, stop it. Like, that will get disinteresting quickly. If it's true behavioral coaching, absolutely. Do as much of it as you can.
Kevin, I'm going to interrupt you because you got Paula's endorsement, and that's a big deal. Paula's one of our customers, and she said, I love that, Kevin. And so I'm going to ask Paula, I'm going to ask your question next, which is, what is the, and this is a really tactical one, what is the minimum or maximum of outbound calls currently that a SaaS seller needs to make? Is there a sweet spot? So I think that that's probably a more complicated question. It's probably super specific to you know, a specific business. But is there, when it comes to calls, you know, what does that, just like we're talking about time spent in the coaching conversation, like how much time should a seller be doing the tactical things that you need them to do? Like what the flip side, what's
well, I mean, like I would give this, and I'll throw it to Brian, like Paula can find that answer, right? But the answer is, if you go too far left or too far right, you'll get bad data. Like, how many deals can a seller sell? Like, well, that's too far right. How many calls do they make too far left, right? Mm-hmm. Do you know how many conversations I have to have in order to get a meeting, right? Like, if you know that, then maybe you could say, well, how many people do I need to catch live to get a meeting? Do I know what every seller converts those meetings into pipeline accounts? Well, if I know that, then I get closer to saying, well, maybe Amy only needs X and Bill needs Y. Like, I mean, the data is there, but I think everybody's got to get better at organizing in a way that says, I don't want to just hammer calls, because people will give me exactly what I ask for. But if that doesn't yield good meetings, it's a waste of time. Right now, I've got, like I mentioned before, all sellers at capacity because they're doing 20 meetings a week. They're doing just what we said. The meetings are all bad because I hammered calls and calls had to leave the outcomes. There's a balance in there, but I think you got to really figure out, like, what's our conversion rate of conversations? And I love what Brian said. If you catch the metric in the middle, which is, how many real people do I need to speak to a day? Well, maybe you got a seller, an SDR that's willing to come in at 7 a.m. and catch 7 people before they start the day. Great. Maybe that's enough. And maybe they convert 50% of those to meetings. Well, I'm not going to yell at him about go make 300 phone calls. He made the right 7. Like, fantastic. Because the right metric is how many people do I need to talk to drive FSIs or visits? Super.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Kevin. I think it's a mixture. It's not going to be specific to every business. What I get really nervous about or uncomfortable is when you walk in and people don't know those conversion rates back up the funnel. And so you go start with someone and they have an expectation of quota or how many deals sold or revenue. And as you start to break that, you know, down by conversion rate from every step in their specific org's process, you come to a number that just doesn't have any downstream effect to how it's, you know, converting through the funnel. And so, you know, hopefully I think that is one of the areas where, you know, whether it's with folks like Ambition or a ton of different tools and methodologies out there, people are opening their eyes to those numbers have to add up in some degree. And then, like you said, there's going to be folks who find their own path and find their own creative way. And you should never penalize them for, you know, cracking the process and making it more effective and more efficient.
Yeah, and do not fall for the big lie, right? Do not fall for more equals more. Like, more does not equal more. More is a good way to break an engine, right? Like, running it hot, hotter, hottest, like, sooner or later the engine breaks. So the misguided belief that, hey, if I just do 3,000 more meetings this year, well, that'll double the 3,000 and I'll yield that. Like, it's not how it works, right? Like, those 3,000 are by definition likely worse meetings with less qualified prospects, with less qualified SDRs, turning higher turnover into your BDM. Like, there's a huge downstream, like, there's a right number in there. Every company's got to figure out what it is. But it is not just always we'll chase the meeting engine until it breaks, because it will break. And when it breaks, it's really bad for companies. hard to get restarted.
You've said about 8 things that I want to print on a t-shirt or a poster. So I'm glad we're recording this.
I get royalty.
All right. So last one, let's wrap it up with Susie. It's a global market. How do we connect effectively with buyers in distant countries? So we had a lot of questions earlier, you know, just about the methodology, or not methodology, but the actual just, are we texting people? Are we calling them? What does it look like? How do we scale globally with these goals and tactics and all that jazz? What does that look like? Is it more distributed teams? Is it different ways of working leads?
I mean, I could tell
That's
you.
a great question.
I will tell you, it's more complex than a lot of people would like it to be, for sure, right? I mean, we've got an international business in Asia Pacific. We've got one out of the UK. We've got one in Germany, and like there is tremendous nuance across all of them. And I think you do have to be understanding about things optimized to be efficient in North America. There are a whole other slew of hurdles from territory planning, right? I mean, I was just having this conversation yesterday. It's like, hey, why do you got to be so unique and do industry segments in Europe? Like, just assign out the geo. Like, why don't I have anyone that speaks French? Like, who's going to get France? Like, oh, that's a problem, right? So I mean, I think there is a real implication to every touch point. I would encourage folks to put as much consistency as you can, because sometimes because of that nuance, folks want to swing far right. Like everything's got to be different, and then you get no scale. So there's a balance between it. I think most of the tech stack applications now make it way more feasible, right? I mean, being able to use Zoom or video technology or things like that make everything easier. But I mean, there are real hurdles to cross. And some big cultural ones, right? I mean, Germany buys different than Australia.
Absolutely.
Australia buys different than Singapore. And like, you got to be cognizant of those. Build as much consistency as you can.
Yeah, we see that in the, you know, supporting our own customers who have, you know, international operations and sales orgs in different markets. And the fact is that they coach and they incentivize and they, you know, inspire and challenge their people in totally different ways. And we have to support that. We, you know, learn through the process that, just like you said, folks in Australia may operate one way and they may want to coach their reps on a certain type of cadence and with a certain type of tone, if you will. And we have to be really nuanced when we talk to their counterparts in talking to a group in Bermuda the other day. Totally different org, totally different part of the team. And, you know, we have to try to grok that and understand that there's going to be a completely different coaching and sales methodology there with some consistency of how they sell at the org level.
All right, guys, well, we're out of time. This was such a great conversation. Thank you so much, Kevin, for joining us on the video call. Brian, pleasure as always doing business with you. And Paula, I hope you enjoyed it. She did enjoy it. Thank you guys so much. We'll send you the recording. And yeah, until we see you again. All right. Bye, guys.
Thanks, Kevin.
Yep.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,